When your car breaks down, you call roadside assistance. So what do you do if your satellite breaks down? You call Space Machines Company, of course. I spoke to its founder at the UTS Tech Lab here in Sydney. Now, tell me, what does Space Machines do?
Well, let's go back a little bit. Satellites are becoming an inherent part of our society. We depend on lots of things. We don't even realize it, apps, ATMs. And as they become more and more part of our society, their operation becomes pretty critical to what we do and how things work on the ground. And increasingly, there are more and more satellites going up. And so I think a big part of that is how do we protect and make them sustainable. And so security and sustainability play a really important part in making sure this infrastructure, this critical infrastructure stays as is. And so our business is all about making sure that we can, in space, get close to these satellites, understand what's happening with them, protect them, service them, repair them. And so really understand a little bit more data about what's happening in space.
So you're sort of monitor, repair and maintenance for satellites?
Monitor, inspect, protect, those kind of use cases.
It's almost like roadside assistance for satellites.
Roadside assistance, exactly. Very quickly get there, understand, rapidly get there, understand what's going on, and then work out what the next actions are going to be.
Now, going back, you were one of the first Indian students to come to Australia, to ANU and later UNSW. How did you come about with this business idea? How did it all happen?
Yeah, so I moved to Australia in 1995 to train as an aerospace engineer, and so spent two years at ANU and then at UNSW. Not a lot of aerospace jobs back then, so spent some 15 years in other startups and places like Microsoft, and then eventually saw what was happening with SpaceX, both my co-founder George and I decided there was a time and there was a need, so let's start up space business.
Now, you're from Delhi originally, but Bengaluru is the aerospace capital pretty much of India?
Absolutely. I think it's a hub of all aerospace activity. ISRO is based out of there. A lot of their satellite tracking centers are in Bangalore, so it provides as a hub of skills development, capability, supply chain for space.
When I first went to Bangalore some years ago, I had a bit of defence, had a very small airport, but they had a little company called Infosys, which was doing some pretty interesting things. Now it's quite a massive city, isn't it, in terms of infrastructure and industry?
Absolutely. It's become a hub for technology, software, hardware, defence, space. For the last 20 years, it's gone a massive transformation. And it's become a place where people are coming from different parts of the country to train on deep tech, AI, digital transformation and others.
So I wanted to ask you, why India and why Bengaluru? Is it probably because India is investing so much in space?
It is. Look, India's got a heritage of low-cost manufacturing. It's got deep space heritage. It's emerging as a massive pool of capability and talent. And so when we think about all of the ingredients of a great commercial and technical collaboration, it makes for a perfect destination.
I was also going to ask you, in a sense, why Australia, in a sense, how is Australia regarded in Bangalore in terms of space capability? Are we well known, or is it a new thing for Indians?
Look, I think it's emerging. I think the relationship between Australia and India starts from cricket. I think there's a deep love and appreciation of the country. And so I think that works in our favor. I think space is new. Only the last 5 years or 6 years, we've really reignited Australia's journey back into space. And so I think, we're held in high regard in India and an emerging space economy. And so, very keen to work with Australians, very keen to work with Australian companies and Australian people in general, and that's all sort of underpinned by that love for sport.
Now, I wasn't allowed to raise cricket, but seeing you've mentioned it, I will now. I used to work a lot with Steve Waugh when I worked at Austrade, and I understand he's a brand ambassador for Space Machines?
Yes, he is. So last year we were awarded a grant by the Australian Space Agency, which was to develop deeper space ties with India. And as part of that, we're running a mission called Space Maitri. And so what better way to promote that mission than have somebody like Steve, who's well regarded in both countries and a deep deep love for cricket in both places. So he's come on board, and he was at BSX Expo this year, and a fantastic way to find common ground and build deep relationships in something other than cricket.
When you think about Australia and India, the diplomatic, the economic relationship beyond, do you think there's some sectors where Australia and India are quite well suited?
I think there are. Look, space is obviously one of them. I think we've had a long history of being involved in space with everything we did as part of the Apollo program, the Deep Space Network. So there's a deep love for all things space, and Indians have also emerged in the last 60 years as a spacefaring nation and space power. So that's one. But I think climate, energy, everything we do in mining, consumer products. I think as you look at the last 20 years, you see how Australia's really benefited from the rise of Japan and Korea and China. I think the next wave is really India. And so I think we've got to be pretty eyes open that there's a lot of opportunity for Australian companies in the emerging economy that is India, and which in 10 years' time could be in the top 3.
And what advice would you give to an Australian company looking at India for the first time as a market?
Yeah, look, I think, coming from an Indian background, I think India is not transactional. India is relationship built. So you have to spend the time. But I think once you spend the time, the opportunity is great. I think people operate on trust. Trust is a big thing. So we found in our own journey that we have to make the commitment. And once you make the commitment, I think there's a lot of benefit to be had for Australian companies.